Imagine a person standing in front of a mirror. She's not there to look at herself. He's there to find the answer to a question. Who am I? And without realizing it, she expects the mirror to answer. It's strange to think about it, but that's exactly what many people do all the time. They look at life, at the results, at what hasn't happened yet, and they wait for an answer about who they are, as if the world out there could tell them that. But the world doesn't speak, he only reflects. This video is about a simple idea, but one that changes everything when truly understood. Reality doesn't decide who someone is. The person themselves decides who they are, and reality only reflects back what has already been decided. Imagine a common scene. Someone decides to change, decides to be stronger, lighter, freer, and in the following days, begins to look for proof of this change. Looks at their body, looks at their bank account, looks at the people around them, trying to understand if anything has truly changed. And when nothing changes fast enough, a thought comes. Then it's not true. But this thinking stems from an idea that almost no one questions. The idea that change is only real after it has been confirmed by something external. But perhaps that order is reversed, and perhaps it's worth pausing here for a moment, because this inversion isn't just a philosophical curiosity, it changes the way an entire day is lived. A person who waits for external confirmation wakes up every day silently asking the same question: will the sign appear today? And this question, repeated for weeks, for months, begins to weigh heavily, not because life is difficult, but because attention is always turned outward, searching for something that never had the authority to answer. Think of an actor. Before going on stage, he has already decided who he will play. He doesn't wait for the audience's applause to believe in the character. First comes the decision, then comes the performance. If he waited for approval before acting, he would never be able to portray anything. And without realizing it, that's what many people do with their own lives. They decide who they are, but then they ask the world to confirm that decision. The problem is that the world doesn't serve that purpose. Money, results, time, appearance, none of that defines who someone truly is. These things change all the time, without any intention of proving anything. Perhaps this is the first important point to understand. Circumstances have no authority over anyone's identity. They are merely a reflection, and a reflection does not create the image. He only shows what's already in front of him. Therefore, when someone looks at a bad result and concludes, "I'm not capable," or "I'm not that person yet," they are making a small mistake. They are treating the reflection as if it had the power to decide something. But the one who decides is always the person in front of the mirror, not the mirror itself. It's worth noting that this mistake is almost never noticed at the time it happens. It disguises itself as common sense. It seems reasonable to conclude that if the outcome hasn't changed yet, it's because the decision isn't sufficient. But this logic hides a role reversal. It puts the reflex in command and the person in the position of waiting for orders. Perhaps there's a hidden fear behind this. The fear of deciding alone, without any proof, and then discovering that this decision may never hold true. Waiting for an external sign seems safer, It seems like a way to avoid making a mistake, but this wait has a silent cost. While the decision awaits confirmation, it is never fully experienced. It remains stalled, not fully accepted, but also not abandoned. And little by little, this waiting ceases to be a phase. It becomes the very experience of life, day after day. Those who spend their time waiting to believe in who they are end up living only that, waiting, not the real experience of being who you decided to be. Imagine a closed door. Someone could spend years watching the crack underneath, trying to guess if it's safe to open. But while that person is just watching, they remain on the outside. The door doesn't ask permission to open. It just needs to be pushed. The same thing happens with the meaning given to circumstances. Someone looks at something that hasn't happened yet and decides, right there and then, what that silence means. It hasn't happened yet becomes maybe it will never happen, and maybe it will never happen becomes maybe I'm wrong about who I am. But none of these phrases came from outside. They all originated from within the observer. The circumstance by itself means nothing. The mind speaks, giving meaning to silence. And if the mind can give this silence a sense of defeat, it can also give it another meaning, not because it is deceiving itself, but because it is perceiving something simple. Silent has never had a meaning of its own. It has always been filled by whoever looked at it. This changes the place from which real change can begin. If every experience only gains meaning after a decision, conscious or not, then the question was never, does this mean anything? The question has always been different. Who is deciding what this means? And based on what idea of themselves is that person making that decision? This may seem like a small difference, but it's not, because it changes where one places their trust. A person who trusts in a reflection lives dependent on it. They need it to change first, so they can then believe in something different. A person who recognizes the decision as the starting point no longer needs this agreement. They can trust before seeing. They can decide before any proof appears. There is also a common feeling of distance, the feeling that the person one wants to be is still far away. It will still take time to arrive, but this distance arises mainly from the habit of seeking proof. While someone looks for proof that they have already arrived, the feeling that they are still far from arriving remains alive. It's like being inside your own house, walking from room to room, asking, "Have I arrived yet?" The question by itself creates a distance that perhaps never truly existed. The decision works in a similar way. The moment it's made, the encounter with this new identity has already truly happened. It's not a promise for the future. It's something that's already happening now. The mistake lies in treating this decision as a request. You need to wait for a response. It's not a request. That's the answer itself. Even so, it's normal for doubts to continue to arise after the decision. An old thought returns. Discomfort arises without warning. This is often interpreted as a sign of failure, as if doubt proves the decision wasn't right. But perhaps doubt deserves a simpler approach. It can pass like a cloud across the sky, without needing a fight, without needing an argument. A doubt doesn't need to be combated, nor interpreted as proof of anything. She just needs to be let through. The most common mistake is not feeling doubt. It's giving doubt the power to erase the decision. A decision can remain intact, even when a contrary thought arises. The two can coexist for a moment, without one needing to cancel out the other. It's worth remembering this whenever doubt seems bigger than it really is. It often arrives with a sense of urgency, as if it needs to be resolved immediately before any other thought. But most doubts lose their power on their own as soon as they stop receiving so much attention, not because they were overcome, but simply because they passed, like any cloud passes. This helps to see the time between deciding and living that decision in a different way. Normally, this time is treated as a waiting period, as if the person needs to remain still until they receive a signal that they can move forward. But perhaps this waiting was never necessary. Perhaps it only continues to exist as long as someone keeps asking, "Hasn't it arrived yet?" Imagine two people walking on the same trail. One of them walks looking back the whole time, measuring how far they've come, calculating how much is left. The other walks mindfully, present in each step, without treating the next step as proof of the previous one. Both travel the same distance, but only one of them experiences the journey fully. The other lives only in calculation. The difference was never in the trail itself. It was in how each one related to the idea of distance. And perhaps that is the quietest part of this whole reflection. The trail never changes in size, depending on who walks it. What changes is the experience of walking it. Two people can live through the exact same sequence of days and yet experience completely different realities. One experiencing each step as a destination, the other experiencing each step as a journey. This leads to a simple but important point. There is no real separation between the person who decides and the reality that person has chosen to live. This separation is created by the mind. It is sustained by the habit of seeking proof before accepting something as true. This doesn't mean ignoring the world, nor pretending it doesn't exist. It simply means restoring to it the function it has always had: to reflect, never to authorize. When someone thinks, "I've decided, but it hasn't happened yet," they're secretly reverting to an old habit. It's as if that person has already opened the door, and even from the inside, they keep asking if they can come in. The decision does not require a second approval. She is, in herself, the complete movement. Perhaps the most important question isn't, "When will this appear out there?" Perhaps the question is simpler: is anyone willing to let their own decision be enough, even without any external confirmation? This question doesn't require an immediate answer. It only asks for honesty, because it's possible to say yes with your mouth, and still, deep down, be waiting for a sign. True change doesn't happen when this phrase is repeated. It happens when it's no longer necessary to prove it to anyone, even for yourself. Because the world will never stop changing shape, showing signs that can be read in any way. It has always been a mirror, never a judge, and a mirror, no matter how closely observed, will never decide for the person in front of it. The decision always has been and continues to be the only place where change truly happens. Everything that comes after is merely a reflection, arriving in its own time to demonstrate what had already been decided beforehand.